You've seen me use these a lot in the past, and in the next video I'm doing, I'm going to be, as the title of this one says, enhancing ready-to-run models with brass bearing cups. But rather than make that video really long, which it's turning out to be anyway, I thought I'd do a standalone video because I think it warrants it on the why and the how. Starting off with the why, I suppose we'll take a look at this Hornby stone wagon. It's quite an old one, but it's still really good detail for what it is. It's only let down with its plastic wheels. And this one's especially bad because it's got plastic axles as well. And plastic on plastic doesn't make for the best bearing material. Get a string of these together and the efficiency curve must be, well, in the negative, I would expect. Lima models used to suffer from it doubly. With their pizza cutter wheels, at least they were metal. Lima also used a softer plastic for chassis and bogies, which meant that sometimes they could literally burn out. This one didn't seem too bad with the wheels spinning, but look how much slop is in the axle. Occasionally you'd get a model which you could literally just take the plastic wheel sets out, replace them with fine scale wheels, and they'd be absolutely fine. If you take a closer look, you'd probably find that the axle bearing has burnt out. You can see this one's burred over quite badly. So let's have a look at the brass bearing cups. There are 3 distinct types that I use. Other types are available, but they are for specific tasks and fall outside of the realm of this video. They are really small. For clarity, that's a 5p piece. They're relatively cheap, about 10p each, so a pack of 40 is £4. I normally buy a pack every time I order from either H&A Models or Wizard Models. The top hat and waisted bearings we normally use for kit builds, where there is a prescribed place for them to sit, where the shoulder will give the exact distance to where it's supposed to be, whether that's on a bogie or on side frames. The only real difference between them is how much they protrude out, the clearances that they give. For this video though, we're going to concentrate more on the third type, which is the flangeless bearings. There's probably a couple of ways we can install these on ready-to-run models. There's the easy way, the hard way, and the cheat way. Life would be so much easier if you could just pop some brass bearing cups into the holes already there, put some new axles in, and away you go. But as you can see, that would force the axle guards apart to such a degree that the wheels wouldn't even spin. So, in conjunction with my next video, I'm going to do the easy way, which involves cutting off the existing axle boxes, which after all are only cosmetic, which is great because I want to change them from the original oil style axle box to roller bearing. One side's normally easier than the other because of the handbrake lever. I say easier, it's difficult but not impossible, using just a razor saw. After cutting off the axle box, there's normally a small hole left where the moulded slot for the axle pokes through. We can exploit this with a 2mm drill, drilling from the outside in and then straight through the other side axle box. Using the moulded pinpoint as a guide, we can then put our flangeless brass bearing cup in. The brass bearing cup is 2mm in diameter, so with a 2mm hole there should be enough friction to keep it in place. If there's not, just drop a little bit of liquid poly in, it should be fine. Adjust the bearing cup so there's little to no play in the wheel set. A little bit is okay, but it needs to be a tiny little bit, and that should account for any inaccuracies we've created when we're drilling through. Before we glue them into place permanently, we can make sure that there's equal amounts of bearing cup poking out each side of the side frames. Give the wheel set a good spin just to make sure that it's running freely, and then we can pop on our cosmetic replacement bearings. And job's a good one. We're all done for this bit. It looks easy. It's a lot more difficult to explain. And even more difficult is the next method that I'm going to show you, which involves a specialized tool. It's called the axle box bearing cutting tool. It's basically a short, stubby 2mm drill that fits in between the sole bars. This way we can drill out the axle boxes for the brass bearing cup without chopping off the cosmetic axle box. Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all tool, so we're going to have to do a little bit of mathematics, and it's going to be different for every model and every manufacturer, and every manufacturer of the brass bearing cups. I should be doing this measurement with a micrometer, but I haven't got one, so I'm going to use my vernier. On this little jig that I made up to measure the bearing cups, the outside diameter, which will eventually dictate how much we dig out of the axle boxes. It should be 27mm, and it pretty much is. Next we measure the inside diameter of the axle boxes that we're replacing. Again, this measurement will probably be different for every model that there is. It won't be by very much, just a tiny amount, but it will be different. On this model, it is 22.5mm. So the calculation is going to be the overall length of our axle and bearing cups, which should be 27mm, minus the distance between the side frames, axle boxes on the plastic model, which is 27.5 minus 22.5 on this model, which equals 4.5, and divide that by 2 because we're going to be drilling out both axle boxes. And that should be the amount of drill that pokes out the end of our brass thingamajig. We can measure that with the depth gauge on our vernier gauge. The next stage is not pretty or elegant. There's lots of fingers and thumbs. You have to hold the chassis in one hand, squeeze together, and then turn the tool into this axle box. You have to keep adjusting it out, otherwise it keeps falling out, so you have to keep adjusting the length of it. Eventually we get a hole on both sides that's worthy of putting a flangeless brass bearing cup into. Push them in as far as they'll go, insert a wheel set, and test to see if we've done it correctly. The maths and the theory should be solid. However, reality disagrees, and I'm not going to lie to you, this was the second attempt of me doing this. My first attempt was a little bit too tight, so the wheels wouldn't spin, so I had to push one of the bearing cups out and then re-drill it. Theoretically, this should be the end of the video, but I'm going to show you how to do it the cheat way if you don't have the specialist tool. It's not as accurate and it's a little bit messy. We start off with a 2mm bit in our hand drill, extended so that it will fit through the entire width of our chassis. Drill from the outside through an axle box. This is where it's not as accurate because you're never quite sure if you've got the centre. Once you've drilled through, poke it into the opposite side axle box slot, drill out until it doesn't come through. If you put your finger behind and press, you should be able to feel when it's about to come through, but not all the way through. It will show up when you put the wheel sets in as well, because they won't be totally centered. They'll more likely be offset to one side. As before, drop a bearing cup into each side, pop a set of wheels in, and then see how they spin. And then you can adjust the distance by just squeezing gently. You will be left with a hole in one side of one axle box. This can then be filled with super glue, making sure that none of it slips past the bearing cup into the axle, seizing it up. It's inevitable that there'll be a little bit of play in the axle, but only a tiny little bit, which is about 10 times less than what there is in a normal ready-to-run model. The benefits of upgrading to brass bearing cups is probably virtually friction-free running, and I would say maintenance-free running for the rest of your life, let alone the wagon's life. Hopefully this is helpful to at least some of you. This is all I have for the moment. As I said at the beginning, this video was designed to reduce the length of the next one, which is well underway, and the topic of which is on the screen now. Until then, thanks for watching. See you very soon.